Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens with your hosts, Jake and Scott. In this week's episode, Scott and I do this again for the third time this year. It's just us, no interview. And so we come up with a random topic, and this random topic is favorite bourbon producers outside of Kentucky. There are many. We just name our top three, and they're not really a top three. It's three bottles that we could get to, probably the quickest, but three we enjoy. So sit back and buckle into the latest episode of the Bourbon Lens. Scott, how's it going? And all the people won't understand that there was about 7 outtakes to get to this point, but I'm glad we're here finally.
You finally made it.
Finally made it. My brain wasn't working.
I'm proud of you.
Hey, you know, we don't normally start podcast at nearly 10 o'clock, so, you know, beggars can't be choosers with how good my English language is right now.
I was going to say, it seems like these get pushed later and later every week, but thankfully the kids are in bed, and hopefully they stay that way.
Yeah, no kidding. And thankfully, all the sickness has left anywhere near us. And, you know, it's a good thing. Are the kids back in school yet? Are they still doing NTI? What's going on with Jefferson County?
They went back. Yeah, we'll see. Cause I think the sicknesses are still going around. So, we shall see. They were out Friday and Monday, and then Tuesday with the snowstorm.
Snow.
I mean, the least impressive snowstorm I've ever seen, but what can you do? So, yeah, they're back. We'll see.
It got a little sticky there for a second, though. Like the driveway going down the hill got a little slippery, and then I came back. It rained and it was all gone.
Well, I think the temperature was warm enough that it didn't nothing stuck except for the grass. But
yeah, well, I tell you what, the kids across the street made some bomb ass snowmen. Like they're like my height. So they're like 6-foot snowmen.
That's
it's
impressive.
Pretty cool.
That's a lot of snow that's probably like the whole yard worth of snow.
It was kind of cool because like all you saw was like these green patches. Like it was like snow on one side and then green patches right through the middle. So good ingenuity. I mean, good for them.
And now Frosty is melted and gone.
No, Frosty's still hanging on tough. All the other snow's gone as we now head towards the torrential flood of Saturday. Yeah.
I'm ready for
things I'm not looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm ready for sunshine and warmer weather.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I was in Asheville over the weekend, and man, it was 65, sunny. It rained at night, but it was great. We got to hike. Asheville is still kind of a disaster. Like you can see the slides and everything that happened. Still a lot of prayers, a lot of thoughts for that community in North Carolina.
How was that?
I-40's blocked completely, so you got to go around that at certain points. And then most of like the side roads are open, but like trailheads are wiped out. We were on a trail hiking around, and the guy whose cabin we went to, he's been in North Carolina. I don't know. His house is down there, but he also, you know, has been going to the same trails for 20 plus years. And he's like, that's not where the trail used to go. And then we would like weave through stuff. Or they'd be like, Jake or Nick or whomever that was out in front, go up there and see if you can see where the next clearing is. So we would monkey over some trees, and go. It was fun. But man, they have this hill. And so you go up 600 feet of incline in, less than a half a mile. And so the record, of all the people that have done it was 10 minutes. And my buddy starts running out in front of me. I was like, well, I can't let him just run by himself. So I run after him and I get up there, and I literally, like, I don't know, 15 seconds into this, I'm like, oh my gosh, my heart's about to explode.
I'm not cut out for this.
Not that type of elevation gain. And it's so slick because of the brush on the ground. And so it was kind of one of those points. Either I keep going or I die because I stop. So I kept going. I did it under 10 minutes, which would be the new record for like the people that are normal folks. But apparently his nephew is also Will Smith from the Dodgers. He did it in under 8 minutes. So I have nothing on a professional athlete, but us normal folk, I got the record for them.
That works. Yeah, that's a cool little trip you had.
Yeah. I mean, if you like getting outdoors, like going 20 minutes north or south or east of Asheville, I don't know exactly where we were, in Old Fort, ton of great hiking, Beer's still good. It's cold. They know what they're doing from a beer culture there. Food's great. And man, it was just nice to kind of unwind with a group of guys. And then we play stupid games like Spud or Euchre.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Euchre's fun. It had been a while since I played, but it's so much quicker than Spades.
I've never played Spades, so yeah. I'd have
Well,
a lot
with the
to learn.
Cincinnati family, you should know Euchre, right?
I've sat in on a couple games. I don't know that means I know how to play. You know what? Yeah. I'll volunteer to play or try to, but usually it just ends in, that's not how you do these.
Scott, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's like,
What are you doing?
What do you mean you? No, I don't really. Card games
Poker,
are not
you
my
leave
thing.
it at poker?
Yeah, poker. Not even blackjack. Like, I don't get the math of blackjack and the odds and stuff like that. I'm just like, I'm better at bluffing, I guess.
Typically, it's really like roulette or nothing for me. Really simple.
It's like, what's that complicated game? Baccarat? I'm like, no, not happening.
No. Like, I look over there and everyone's IQ is like 120 plus. I can't sit there. Mine's barely 50.
Slot machines. Just pull the slots. I can do that.
I know how to pull a lever. I know how to put dollars in a little coin press.
Yeah.
I got many of Coke out of vending machines. I'm good at that.
Yeah. Nice.
Oh man. We do have a big thing coming up before we get into our next topic is Valentine's Day. Do you celebrate the Cupid with Courtney?
Not really. No, we're such an old couple. It's maybe she'll say something otherwise, but yeah, we do something fun for the kids, but not really. We did just go on a date though. We went on a date last week to dinner or dining with Millie. Dining at Millie's, I think it's called. But Bourbon's Bistro, their chef, was doing a cooking class, and it involved bourbon and wine, and we cooked a meal. But you go in there, and there's like 15 other couples, and everybody's got their own station and stove, and basically just you watch the chef, and he's teaching you how to cook it, and you cook it, you prepare everything, and then you sit there and eat, and it's, got a bottle of wine to go with it, and bourbon, and Buzzard's Roost was there because Bourbon's Bistro, but
Sweet.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But that
is that the one right there next to the like a couple streets up from the Omni?
Yeah, so it's at like 4th and Chestnut. It's right by the Henry Clay.
The Henry Clay, thank you. That's what I was thinking of.
The Henry Clay, and it's cool. I mean, I don't know what it costs. It was a gift that she gave me because of the bourbon component, but I think it was like being like $60 or $80 a person. I mean,
it's not
for
bad.
Wine and food, and it was essentially what food you would get at like Bourbon's Bistro. We cooked their famous pork chop, the thickest damn pork chop I've ever had, but it was awesome. Well, and to do it yourself, I'm like, I could do this at home anytime.
Yeah, I can make this.
I'm a professional.
But you won't. Yeah. We celebrated Valentine's Day early. So we went to Jeff Ruby's. And before everyone goes and be like, oh, Jake's always going to these fancy steakhouse, I had $300 in gift cards. They needed to be used. And, I went and I enjoyed. And I had every course. I had some bubbles. Always, I found this out from fancy people. You have bubbles to start off your steak dinner. Gets your palate right. And then, went with the French onion soup. And then went the 14-ounce New York strip. And then we split the cornbread. Probably wouldn't have done that again. And then the loaded baked potato. Always got to go with baked potato.
Oh, yeah.
And then they have this new skillet cookie that's got chocolate ice cream and vanilla ice cream on it. That was delightful.
Oh.
I had to be rolled out of there.
Yeah, that's how it felt after our dinner. We homemade brownie.
Ooh.
And it had some kind of like graham cracker like frosting, and then there was like marshmallow fluff on top, and then you charred it. So like I guess like kind of like bringing in the bourbon element, but it was amazing. There were some people that were like lighting this shit on fire. And there were other people that were just like barely torching it. It was just funny to see the different levels of sensitivity to like char. I mean, I guess you see it around like a campfire, but usually when you got a campfire going, people like accidentally catch their stuff on fire, but people are going nuts. So
when there's a campfire, I normally can't see well enough to see like what my marshmallow is actually going to do.
Other than just turning to molten lava.
Yeah. I just kind of throw it in there and pray it comes out okay.
Yeah.
But because I was out last week, I did send flowers a week early. And then today, actually, Sherry's Berries chocolate covered strawberries showed up. And then on Friday, I am going to give her a card, right? Just a simple card. And then I'll probably, give her like take a Diet Coke to work or something.
Yeah.
She likes that.
No.
So keep it simple.
That's cool. And you kind of spread it out through.
Yeah.
It's not all just like, there's always the people at the office that like have 5 dozen roses. Yeah, 2 dozen roses like covering their desk. And you're just like, all right, well, Courtney works out of her car, so I can't really do that. So it's usually, the flowers end up on the table when she comes home. They're already there. And I do that on occasion too, just for different things, but just to have flowers in the house. So
sometimes you just need to have flowers in the house. I mean, they are good to look at and they smell nice as well. So, there is some niceness to have that. And you know what also is nice to have at the house?
Bourbon.
Correct. That is 100% correct. That you won. Scott also, as a reminder, got 100 on his Moonshine University test, and I got a 98. So he is the smarter of the two of us, if you were ever wondering that.
Gosh.
But I did finish first.
But you missed that one question. I think it was only one, right?
Yeah, it was only one. I got however many questions.
It was a wording problem, I think. We'll blame that.
Yeah. We'll just blame it on the fact that
that was a lot of fun.
Went through quick. We actually talked about that today when I met with Marlene. And so, this is out now. So Marlene got Holmes from Milam and Green was named part of the new Hall of Fame class for American Whiskey Awards, Icons of Whiskey. So I think that's pretty cool.
It's awesome.
And she was talking about that's how she learned how to use a pot still because she had all of her experience at Beam on a column.
Yeah.
So that's pretty damn cool.
Yeah. Trial by fire again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So.
No kidding. So we have all this whiskey and sometimes, we focus on Kentucky bourbon a ton, right? And why wouldn't we? But there are plenty of states that produce a lot of great whiskey and a lot of great bourbon in particular. So for all those people that mess with you, no, bourbon does not have to be made in Kentucky. It just has to be made in America. And just learned this from our boy Whiskey Titan. I don't know he's changed his name. Let's call him Whiskey Titan on X. He also runs Baxis. You can actually produce these in the owned entities of America, like Guam. You could produce bourbon, which is pretty cool.
Puerto Rico.
I thought that was Puerto Rico. Really interesting fact. And so we've scoured our bar backs and our other places where we keep bourbon.
Everywhere in the house.
Everywhere in the house, exactly.
Oh,
Toy chest, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And we found 3 unique bourbons that we think highlight great bourbon made across America. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. This is not the best list. This is a list of bourbons that we think are great that you should probably pay attention to. I'd say that classifies this pretty well. And so you probably are tired of hearing from me. So Scott, we're going to let you go first. What distillery and why did you pick this first bourbon?
Yeah, so I know we've talked about this distillery quite a bit, and sometimes it's on the American single malt side, but we've discussed also like how their bourbons are some of the best bourbons outside of Kentucky. It's Boulder Spirits. So for the past 2 years, they've released a super high proof cast strength bourbon. I think they're like 130, 134 proof. They tend to rock it up in proof. Even their lower proof, standard offerings, packed full of flavor. They have kind of a different mash bill than what you're used to. Like it's not super high corn. It's actually got a lot of malted barley, and that's kind of the Scottish influence, and they're leaning into like American single malts. But Boulder Spirits, they've been really good to us. They've been on the tasting club. They've been on the podcast. They've given us the opportunity to try their cast strength bourbon, So I always kind of lean for that. Like when I'm trying to tell somebody like, hey, try something outside of Kentucky. You know, at the end of the day, I'm going to drink Kentucky bourbon because that's what is home to me. But if somebody comes up to me and says, hey, what's a distillery that I've never heard of that I should try? Boulder Spirits is probably one of them. It always comes to mind.
Yeah, for sure. No, I get that. And speaking of, not knowing a distillery, I was on a call today. As most people know, I'm in sales and talk to people around the country. And I was talking to a group out of Missouri, and one guy lived in Kansas City. And, this takes me to my first distillery that I want to talk about. It got a lot of pub last year, and for a variety of reasons, Bourbon Lore did a specific single barrel out of that. You had a couple influencers go there and really promote the crap out of it. A good friend of ours, Rare Bird, also promoted the crap out of it. I got to go and visit it. And so Ben Holladay or McCormick Distillery, just north of the Kansas City airport. They have two offerings. They have a bourbon and a wheated bourbon. And the soft red winter wheat, you're going to notice a theme with the bourbons I chose. And this is the 100 proof offering, the bottled and bond, which I think is perfect for craft distillation. It shows that they are waiting for that. And this is by no means craft. I mean, they have a nice column still. They have great rick houses. Like they're really doing things in a traditional Kentucky style, I would say, but craft from a production scale perspective. If you want to know more about them, you can go check out the podcast featuring their master distiller, Kyle. And it's a lot of great liquid coming out of there. And if you can try their bottled and bond, I think it's 6 years old, maybe going on 7 now. Their regular high rye bourbon is also phenomenal. But really where I think they shine is the rickhouse proof in the wheated. I think it just gives a little more oomph. But, for us, I think the 100 proof bourbon is a great everyday offering at 6 years old, bottled and bond. You can't beat that. And that just screams craft bourbon done right to me.
I think the thing I like most about Holladay is, yes, it's unique, but it's familiar. Like it's not so far afield that a Kentucky bourbon drinker is going to be like, what the heck is this? Like it's familiar, but it also has like its own little spin on things. So I think that's what they do really well.
It'd be really great to taste this blind against like Maker's 101, right? Because Maker's doesn't have a bottled and bond now yet. They should. Why don't they? Come on.
I don't know anything you don't know, but I would just say that's probably going to be coming.
We need a Maker's bottled and bond. If you're listening, Maker's Mark, Beam Centauri or Centauri Global, whatever it is, you change your name often. Maker's Mark bottled and bond, 7 years old. I feel like that's a great number.
Oh, that perfect. I mean,
perfect. Why not?
Yeah, because I think like 11 or 12 is too much, but maybe the 6 or 7 year bottled and bond could be about $100. Special release
needs to be like $50.
Well, it won't.
What are we doing here?
It won't be, but maybe.
Maybe. Come on. We're in the golden age of the consumer, man. They're going to listen to us one day. They're going to listen to the Bourbon Lens and be like, you know what? We need to move this product, and they're going to sell everything at affordable prices. So if you could go anywhere next, right? You've got a variety of different things. We talked in our pre-meeting, so you're not going to shock me by anything you say. But where would you go next if you were saying, okay, I showed you Boulder. What now?
Yeah, I think the next big market is that people should explore, and people are probably a little bit apprehensive about, is Texas. I think my eyes were open to Texas whiskey with Nico Martini's book called literally Texas Whiskey. And just like the perceptions of Texas whiskey as the years have gone on, they should be changing. The whiskey's gotten older. They've got their feet underneath them. They know what they're doing. They know what the conditions are like, what they need to do to nurture those barrels while they age, because the aging environment can be very harsh. But I went to Texas, and I kind of went through the list, and I was like, well, there's a bunch of distilleries in Texas, but I think the one that does it consistently good and is consistent like through their portfolio is Garrison Brothers. They only do bourbon. So
only bourbon.
Yeah, they only do bourbon. So you don't have to, worry like, oh, they've got this weird rye whiskey or they've got this weird single malt, or it's only bourbon. So it's literally, they do finishes, and then they do a small batch, and then they do their high proof stuff, cowboy bourbon, which will make your eyes water, usually over 140 something proof. But I just poured some of their small batch 94 proof Texas straight bourbon. I think it's 4 years old. Yeah, but it's all theirs. I mean, they're one of the original distilleries in Texas. So I know there's some claims about who was the first Texas whiskey or who was the first Texas bourbon, but nobody cares. It's just do it right. And I think that's kind of one that I would point people to, like if you're looking to branch out a bit.
Yeah. Another Texas distillery. I got to try them. Also blended by a phenomenal person in Nancy Fraley. I think you can't sleep on what's happening in Still Austin as an honorable mention to what's happening in Texas. There's a lot of great things in Texas. I think a lot of American single malt out of Texas is, but the bourbon, I've not had as much Garrison Brothers, but I had a great tour at Still Austin. The whiskey's great. The Blue Corn is really, really good. And they have one of the best in the business blending their product. And so that doesn't hurt one iota in my mind.
Yeah. And I've had two of their bourbons. I've had like one of their original bourbons. I think it was like 94 proof, like their standard offering. And it surprised me because my impression, this was years ago, like 3 years ago or so. My initial impression was this is going to be super hot. It's going to be very different, but it was very traditional. Again, it was column still, like it seems very familiar, but
yeah,
it's different. It's Texas whiskey. It's been aged in Texas, so that's a world of difference. But in terms of the distillate, I think that it was very familiar.
Yeah, it's definitely special. So I'm going to go from your extreme climate to a more temperate climate, and I'm going to head to Charlotte, North Carolina. And I think Carolina has a lot to offer. I think there's a lot of good similarities to Kentucky and Carolina. And it's got a lot of heritage when it comes to overall whiskey production, like when you go back to like the founding fathers type time frame. And it's really kind of buoyed by Southern Star or Southern Distilling, however you want to know them by. And Pete Pete has done a great job with creating this along with his wife, Vienna, to really be a powerhouse. They not only produce their own stuff, they also contract distill it for a variety of other brands, Oaklore, Cook's Mill, and probably some we don't even know, right? Because it's under NDA. And so it's really cool what's going on out of this. And again, picked another wheated bourbon just to talk about. Their Paragon is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different. I would say it's a lot different than most wheated bourbons. It's got a different flavor profile altogether. But it's award winning. It is really good. Again, 100 proof, like sweet spot kind of whiskey, bourbon for us. And so this wheated bourbon is great. I also like the standard, like their regular bourbon is just called the Standard.
Yeah.
And that's the best name for a bourbon. Yeah. So, shout out to them. If you want to go catch our podcast episode with Pete, it aired last October. And it's a great listen. Pete's great. They've also been on the Tasting Club. And man, really, really enjoy what's happening out of North Carolina and Southern Star.
Yeah. Shout out to that. So we get 2 Tasting Club bottles. So that's
good job.
Yeah. So
for me,
shout out,
not you.
Shout out to the
3. We've hit 3.
Oh,
Holladay was one as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so if you've been sleeping on the Patreon Tasting Club, then some access to some different whiskeys that you might not otherwise get to see.
You could have tried these. But now, this one is something we both hold a little bit near and dear to our hearts, the last one. And so we got to take a trip out here. Probably would never go to this state if it wasn't for this, honestly. I mean, there's a lot of cool things I would want to do in the state. Just have never gotten there in our, under 40 years of life. And so had to include both of our ages, right? Yeah. And so, this one I think is really cool. It's also buoyed by the fact that a good friend of ours pushes the shit out of this whiskey, right? And Bob, and if you're not checking out Cocktails with Friends, drops every Friday, and it's a cocktail-focused podcast around conversations. Check that out. But I'll let you spill the tea on what this whiskey, quote unquote, is all about.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the whiskeys that kind of opened our eyes early in the podcast to whiskeys outside of Kentucky, or at least it did for me. I don't know if this is for you, but I was like, damn, this is some good ass whiskey that's outside of Kentucky, but it's all the way out in God's country.
Yeah.
Right.
Literally.
In Wyoming. But it's Wyoming whiskey. And for people not super familiar with the brand, they make a hell of a wheated whiskey. That's one of their high water marks, but they have some lineage with Steve Nally, who was formerly at Maker's Mark and then has retired on multiple occasions, came back and still works. And now he's at Bardstown Bourbon, but at one point in time he was in Wyoming and still has a house out there. But
yep.
Yeah, Wyoming whiskey, a wheated whiskey. They've been at it for a while. Most of their whiskeys now are 6, 8. Some of their special releases are 10 years old now. So they've hit like this awesome spot to where they've got some crazy limited releases. If you're an outdoorsman, if you like to travel, a lot of their bourbons, the national parks editions, those things that, speak to people outside of just whiskey drinkers. So that's the one.
100%.
That's the one I've got here. National Parks, number 3. National Parks number 3. It's a 5-year age stated small batch, straight bourbon whiskey. But yeah.
So National Parks every year might be one of the best wheated bourbons on the market, like bar none. And people are like, well, what about WLW? And I'll be like, okay, you can have your high proof wheated bourbon. But from a easy to drink, enjoyable sip, start to finish, National Parks is phenomenal. I actually have a private stock. So I have, Bob's Cocktails with Friends barrel, 106.8 proof. So a little bit above what I've been drinking all night. But their barrels from batch to batch are so variable. They have really high end stuff and they have really everyday stuff. Their 88 proof is great that you can enjoy. So I think Wyoming whiskey is really good. So we named a variety, a collective whole of 5 different states that you should try. And we think this is a really good encompassing, I would say, of what bourbon is outside of Kentucky. Now, obviously, you can go to Indiana and you could pick MGP, right? Or Penelope or Remus or any of that. Like, that's great. Indiana's phenomenal. Or you could go to Tennessee, which is bourbon. We've heard, Chris Fletcher say it on many times. Tennessee whiskey is bourbon. So you could pick Jack Daniels or Company Distilling or any of those places. Great. And there's other states that are doing, some really cool stuff. So if you could pick another brand outside or another state outside of Kentucky, what state would you say that's making good bourbon for the people?
Oh, well, I think when we first talked about this topic, I was like, oh, the cop-out answers. I got it. Like Tennessee is making some of the best bourbon. It's Tennessee whiskey, but that's a controversial take. But even inside of Tennessee, it's like Chattanooga whiskey making some incredible bourbons, incredible high malt bourbons. George Dickel, they've been putting out 8 and 10 and 12-year-old bourbon. Like, yeah, I mean and it's super affordable. So it's like, there's other people that are doing it other than the ultra big guys.
For sure.
So
another one I'm going to throw on the radar is in South Carolina. We've had this brand on before. Highwire Distilling.
Yeah.
Gotten a lot of pub lately. They have one of the coolest looking jugs you'll ever see. Nerdy about corn, high corn bourbon. The longest podcast we've ever recorded, and you all only got to hear a snippet of it because we weren't ready for Bourbon Lens Corn Talk yet as a side podcast. But we probably could now,
the corniest podcast in bourbon.
Exactly. South Carolina, I think, has a lot to offer. I think the Carolinas, Georgia, right? You could even dip that, like that little quadrant, because you have Old Fourth doing some cool stuff, 13th Colony in Georgia. So I think that southeastern quadrant over there has got some really cool stuff coming out of it.
Yeah. And then I was also thinking, well, Indiana, another cop out, right? One of the biggest producers. But I was like, no, I'm going straight to Starlight.
Yeah.
Craft bourbon, craft finished whiskeys, craft finished, bourbons and ryes. But then also you got like Hard Truth.
Yep.
I think I'm not in the middle of the state, but a couple hours.
It's in Columbus.
Yeah. So they've got some really good bourbon, really good rye. I know we were focusing on bourbons, but there are tons of other great bourbon distilleries in Indiana too. So
yeah,
the Midwest.
Well, you have Alan Bishop, his new project. You got Spirits of French Lick. You have Old 55. There's a lot of things happening in Indiana.
Yeah, and then if you want to really like venture out, like Few Spirits outside of Chicago, like smaller but ultra craft, cool, like just a cool brand.
It is. And I would partner that with another cool brand, which would be Kings County out of New York.
God, yeah. See, going down the list, like I had some ultra honorable mentions, like Fort Hamilton. Now I know they do a lot of rye, but their bourbons are really damn good too. So
yeah,
New York whiskeys. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of really good bourbon and whiskey made outside of Kentucky. And don't get this twisted, everybody. Scott and I love Kentucky bourbon. Scott has more bottles of JTS Brown than most people have even seen on shelves. So
yeah, like when you go to Costco and they've got the pallet, just imagine
that's what Scott's got.
2 or 3 of those in storage.
In storage. That's in his pod that he keeps outside of his house.
Yeah, like Dave Ramsey. That's my 3 months of emergency fund and my rainy day fund.
Yeah, your rations.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great bourbon. Kentucky makes great, but there's a lot of great whiskeys to try. And if you're a high rye guy, we can point you that way. If you're a weeded person, we can point you that way. If you do like rye whiskey, which we both, enjoy in a variety of ways, we can point you a variety of different ways that way. So, and we didn't even talk about probably one of our favorite distilleries. I got to stop for this for a second because we haven't ventured to Nevada.
Yeah.
Got to say it their way. Frey Ranch. I mean, come on. Like, if this couldn't be an episode about bourbon outside of Kentucky if we didn't mention Frey Ranch.
Yeah. And now they've hit their stride and they're going to be putting out some limited release whiskeys, some great age statement bourbons. Yeah. I mean, that was kind of what I was weighing. I was like, okay, I've got like this list of like 10 on my phone here. And I was like, yeah, but don't we always mention them? Like, isn't that expected?
Yeah.
It's kind of like people like me talking about JTS Brown. Like, people expect that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we ventured outside the box a little bit, especially me picking weeded bourbon. I mean, I don't really necessarily love weeded bourbon all that much, but these are 3 great expressions.
Yeah,
just happened.
Yeah.
When two of them kind of worked out, I had to just go with the third one, right? And so it's a lot of fun. Let us know, who's your favorite distillery that is producing outside of Kentucky, bourbon or rye. But we'd love to know who your favorite bourbon producers outside of Kentucky are. And brands, weigh in. Let us know what your favorite one is. Or if you want to join the podcast and tell us why we need to be paying attention to your brand, you can always hit us up at info@bourbonlens.com. Scott and I will get back to you, and we'd love to get you scheduled on the podcast. But thanks, everybody, for listening. Let us know your thoughts, and we'll catch you next time. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. Make sure you're connected with Scott and I via social media on Instagram, X, and Facebook. We'd love to connect. And if you're more the professional type, follow us over on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about Bourbon Lens, make sure you're subscribed to our weekly newsletter, The Weekly Pour. For exclusive content and more, check out Patreon. Follow us there at Bourbon Lens. And last but not least, on your favorite podcast listening app, make sure you're subscribed, because every Monday, Scott and I release a podcast, and we would love to have you here listening to the newest features and the newest whiskey news. And until next time, cheers.